Welcome to GaulCast, and we have returning our good friend Renoturos to talk about Senobessus Bolgon. How's it going, man?
Good, good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Now, before we get into it, I know that I've talked to a few of you guys, and like I know the tradition at Senobessus Bolgon. Is there another name for it?
Yes, that was going to be my first thing. So we're in the middle of a name change, and the name change has been going on for about a year now.
Hmm.
And so we are now Montelon Bolgon. So, instead of the way of the Belgae, just slightly changed it. But we're still online on our website is still Senobessus Bolgon. So you may find it under either or, and abbreviations for that being SB or MB. Know that they mean the same thing.
Yeah, and just because I have it written down the way, I'll be using SB quite a bit, just because Senobessus Bolgon's kind of a mouthful.
Yes, exactly. That's what we call it too, SB or MB.
Yeah. So how and I know that SB is like one of the first Gaulish traditions. How long has it been around?
You know, that's actually far before my time. I know that SB is old enough to be acknowledged in the back of Ancient Fire, so it was probably still during the heyday of Gaulpol, back when it first went on the Discord and migrated from Tumblr. I don't know quite how long. I think roughly probably the same as from what I've been told as Besos Nui Galation, probably a couple weeks earlier than that, but that's the only thing that I've heard. So those two came out roughly the same time, give or take a few days here or there. And so as far as I know, those were also some of the earlier like distinct traditions. So it's up there. It's a little long in the tooth comparatively.
It's definitely earlier than BNG, because I just remember when we came out with BNG, we we made the mistake of saying that we're the first Gaulish tradition, completely forgetting that Senobessus Bolgon was still around.
Well,
that was a big fiasco. That was a big whoopsie on our part. But I know Silgawiros is the founder. Did he found it by himself?
No. I didn't. I was about to actually you there. Senobessus founded it along with Brun, and they both put in a huge amount of work. And I'm unsure exactly how those two came together, but I know that Kasana, and I'm sure anyone who's in Touta Galation or in Forum Gallicum is aware of Kasana. She's fantastic, especially if you have any sort of like linguistic questions. Just absolutely brilliant. I mean, she composes entire devotional poems and literature in Proto-Germanic and West Germanic. And so I know the three of them got together very early on. And I would probably say that Brun and Selg are co-founders, and Kasana probably as well. So they really put a lot of work in there.
I've just always known, Silgawiros to be associated, like synonymous almost with SB. That I forgot about Brun.
I think that is very, very common. And it's funny because, if you ask Selg, one of the main things he says is, I am not the boss of you. Like, I am not in charge of you. I had the idea, I'm not, you don't take orders from me. And it's funny too, because, within the community, Selg, dips out and dips back in. And sometimes we don't see him or hear from him for a couple of weeks. He's a bit like a wandering sage sometimes. So he'll be out, he'll be back in, and, we'll have done something else, and he's like, oh, that's neat, I like what you guys have done. And then we might not see him for a bit. He's very active on TikTok right now though, and he does wonderfully well produced shorts talking about Gaulish cosmology in general. And on Twitter, he's always taking on shall I say folks of a less savory character. If
Well,
you're
with the
familiar.
yeah,
Yeah, I
with
don't want to.
the
This
with the
is your podcast, so I don't want to name any of the non-namables
no, it's
unless you're.
with the new CEO of Twitter. I can
Oh,
imagine
you.
he is plenty busy on
Yeah,
there.
no, yeah, but he's always, always picking fights with known folkists and miscreants and all that, and always taking them to
Yeah,
task. And
that's never
it's a joy
changed.
to watch. It's a joy to watch, especially we're in some other community. You're reading a blog somewhere, and it's just a screen cap of him tearing somebody apart, and you're like, hey, I know that guy. That's fun.
Yeah, as
So
long as I've known Selk, he's always been doing that. So that's something that's never going to change. But yeah, I'm also like unhealthily on TikTok like a lot, and that's like the
yep,
only way I'm still in contact with him because I'm not on Twitter anymore. It's the account's still there, but like I don't go on it. So yeah, so Selk and I will talk from time to time through there. Um, yeah, that's funny though. Yeah, I could see him, especially
oh
since
yeah,
it's just like the wild wild west over there now. It's
oh
just
yeah. Well, like I said, I don't do social media, so I have no idea. But I see many people sharing and whatever, and you're in some completely unrelated part of the internet, and he comes up as a recommendation. You're like,
mhm.
hey, I know that guy, and I keep it to myself, but it's fun to see. And yeah,
Yeah.
but like I said, he's far from the only one who conceived or started the tradition, and a lot of the very heavy lifting is done by Brun and Kasana and Vidukus and a lot of the other contributors. It's very
Mhm.
much a group effort, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and honestly, the fact that he kind of comes and goes is very much how I am with BNG right now. Just like because uh, with my personal life, and I'm trying to focus more on the personal life, and then like when I have time, I reach out to other things. So I'm one of the three founders of BNG, but I'm very much kind of like a phantom, just kind of in and out of the scene.
Well, it's how it goes sometimes. Everyone needs the wandering druid or vulva, if you want to be Germanic.
Yeah,
And everyone needs the one who comes and goes and then brings new things every so often. It's part of
exactly.
every
So
tradition.
yeah, for real. Uh, that answers that. Let's see. And I know that like there's quite like I always forget like how many people are in SB. What about Senobessus Bolgon like appeals to people in your
Well,
opinion?
and then that's fun because I knew you were going to ask this question, so I asked everybody else, and a lot of what people got back is they really appreciate the nuance and the diversity within the practice, and it's really funny because within the Belgae tradition, we have, I want to see more a structure that we all adhere to in terms of common themes and overlap. But just like the Belgae of old, some of whom were Gaulish tribes who had been taken over by a Germanic elite, some of whom were, literally 50-50 Gaulish, 50-50 Germanic, some of whom were Germanic people who changed languages and started speaking Gaulish and the other way around. And of all those varieties, you have tribes who worked closer or less close with Rome. So you really have three big ingredients bubbling in that pot together, which is also why I think that Caesar, in his Bello Gallico, he talks a lot about how the Belgae are, distinct. And I think a lot of that is because of the huge variety in there. And that's oftentimes what people enjoy, despite the fact that a lot of our praxis on a personal level look similar or at least have common themes throughout them. It's not like we have a set of gods and goddesses and ancestors, but we come together and we celebrate. So one of the big ones we do is Magus Seniaca, which is a festival for Hercules Magisanos. And, even the very nature of Hercules Magisanos is debated, and I say debated, but it's mainly Selg and I have slightly different opinions on him, but we both love him, and tons of everybody else in there has slightly different take or a different role that Magisanos may play in their praxis, but we all come together and we celebrate him on that day, and we perform feats in competition. And it's really cool because Magisanos is first of all a martial god. but also very much a god of divine wisdom. He's an ancestor figure. And so there's tons of different ways you can approach it. This last Magaseniaka, I did the traditional Swiss thing of Steichstoße, which is when you have a huge boulder and you hold it over your head and you run and you see how far you can throw it. And I threw a 100-pound one, and I managed to get just shy of 7 feet. And my competition was a musical piece composed on the lyre, and someone who had done a poem in an anagraphic fashion. So you had all sorts of diversity, and via divination and stuff. In the end, everything received a certain score and a certain tally, and then we had a winner of the festival, and the winner was declared, and it was really cool. So
That's
despite
awesome.
the fact that there's a huge diversity, there's a lot of the ingredients in the core that are the same, and that's what draws people towards MB. That fluid understanding that cultures interacted and exchanged all throughout history, and oftentimes, and I say this, because you're familiar too, in heathen circles, you'll oftentimes run into those really stuffy recon types who are, pantheon purists, which is a funny concept in itself. They're just like, oh, only the heathen gods. And, then they'll cite characters from the Eddas who have Latin naming conventions and have absolutely no evidence for ever being heathen gods. Or they say, oh, well, the heathen gods. And then take, Uller and Tyr and Njord and Freyr, who are all worshipped in very different Scandinavian parts, and kind of smush them together and present this as the only truth. And I think it ignores a lot of nuance, a lot of people that are stuffy and approach it with a sort of Puritanism instead of saying, hey, I'm making my thing, and here's the sources I draw from. And as Belgae, we're very open about that. We're like, we have scattered sources. What we mainly draw from is a lot of the local gods, and they may fit differently in everyone's praxis.
Right on. And it's funny you say that, because what kind of doesn't bother me, but it also it makes me want to start like a debate when you're talking about like the pantheon purists, where they kind of try to mush people together. When people try to take Freya and Frigg and just smush them together, which seems to happen quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I like to look more at the nuance, like what you guys do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And real quick, just real side note, because you're talking about the I can't remember the name of it, but the taking the boulder and holding it over your head.
Steichstoße, stone pushing.
Steichstoße. There is a show on Discovery Plus. This guy goes around to different countries and he's like a NFL football player, but he goes around to other countries testing out their sports. He goes to Switzerland to do swinging, but there was one day he does the Schweisswasser. I probably just butchered that, but he does that. So he's a big guy, but there's like these massive Swiss guys around him, like, and they're throwing boulders. So it's funny you say that, because I just remember watching them in the documentary.
No, and I want to be perfectly transparent. It may 100 pounds and 7 feet may sound a lot. It's not. The current world record is held by a Minnesotan, but he's a Minnesotan from a Swiss colony. There's actually straight up a lot of Swiss towns and cities in Minnesota that still maintain traditions. They do Sachsalute, they do, let me rephrase that. They do the Wicker Man celebrations, they do the New Year celebrations. They still do all of that, and a lot of them still speak Swiss German or French or any of the Swiss languages. And that guy threw 172-pound stone over 12 feet. So I am nowhere near that. I would not even qualify for this actual sport in Switzerland. But it was still the furthest and the heaviest I'd ever thrown.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I don't want to pretend like I'm anywhere in the league of what these guys do.
Oh, for real. I would love to do swinging, but I know there's probably some guys who are like half my size that would just fold me over and immediately just pin me down.
Well, and that's the thing. too. You gotta start that young. I mean, growing up in the village, I knew kids who were gunning for, the championship, and they started at 11, 12, and they were all
Mhm.
farmers, big grippers. But if you ever do want to do something like that, I think that a lot of the lesser known European wrestling styles, like the Icelandic Glima and there's some clubs that do a more modern version of pancration that is
Mhm.
gonna be fairly close, just minus the striking, or
Yeah.
sumo. If you were ever interested and you found like an amateur sumo league that does like lower weight categories than an actual sumo club, I'm sure that skill would be transferable. Or get really good at bear hugging. That's another one.
Yeah. We kind of touched on it already. You mentioned one in particular, and I've noticed that uh you know I can't remember his I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but like he's very similar to Ogmios, who seems to be more like an ancestor who kind of
Oh
venerated
yeah,
up
yeah,
to
yeah. That's what I just talked about. Magisanos. Yeah,
Magusanos.
Hercules
Yes.
Magisanos, and it's fun because even he is, hotly debated among academics. People are saying, well, Magisanos was his own distinguished figure who then later blended with Hercules. And
Yeah.
then you have people coming along and saying, yeah, but Magisanos is a Germanic um, word. And then you have people saying, no, it's also a Celtic word. And what one of the current leading theories is that Magisanos is either Celtic and means young, old one, so it gives kind of an eternal father figure. Or there's also the idea pioneered by Semek that says it's actually a Germanic word with a Gaulish suffix, which might make sense because we do know that the languages shifted and it was a very blended culture. And then you have the Hercules part tacked onto it. So just like Ogmios, he's very much to us in our practice an ancestor figure, because Magisanos was the chief deity of the Batavians, and the Batavians are a whole wonderful thing in their own right. And it's actually, I may have previously mentioned on my last appearance that I also dabble a lot in Alemanni stuff,
Yeah.
and a lot of that recon has come from Batavian stuff because they were also a mixed people like the Alemanni who had
Hmm.
close ties to Rome. And so the ingredients kind of sort of similar. And to this day, the folklore from those two areas is very, very similar, even having some of the same characters performing similar actions, such as, the sunbeam fairies. Those are very, very present in Belgium as well as Switzerland. So
Yeah.
to this
It,
day, you kind of see people cooking different stews with the same
yeah.
ingredients.
And just real quick, I know like because I believe the name Alamani is essentially like the gathering of men or something. It's
Yeah, it
something
just
similar
means
to it.
all men, and the two things that people think about is it means literally all men. So it's just a bunch of dudes, just a big old sausage fest, or it means all men who
Yeah.
all came together. And it's fascinating too, because when you look at Alemanni grave goods, same as the Batavians, you actually find a lot of glass bangles that the women, or at least the people who are identified as women or fulfilled that role in society, um, but they would wear them on their wrists and they were buried with them. And when they dated these things, they actually were Gaulish artifacts. So hundreds of years old to the women wearing them. And they went into the grave with them. And so you're like, at this point, that must have been important. Who can really say where they came from or the exact cultural ties? But that's another big thing
Yeah.
in MB. Our signature thing is the Donar, which directly translates to Donar's Club, but that was a name that was attributed to the artifact mostly due to that very, very nationalistic German idea in the 1920s. What they really are is that they are Hercules clubs, or they are very analogous to the Hercules clubs worn by the Roman army.
Mhm.
It was very, very common for soldiers in their cult to wear Hercules pendants, and commonly they would be made of sheet metal that was just wrapped around and decorated. And it was the club of Hercules. You wore it with you, protection, similar to how the Icelanders and the Norwegians did Thor's hammer, almost 1,000 years later. And this fashion trend also caught on within the Batavians as well as the Alemanni. And so I'm actually wearing one right now that I'm thinking about it. And yeah, the ancestral ways to make them among the Batavians was deer antler. So that's what this one is. And the Alemanni had deer antler, but they were primarily made out of bone. And occasionally bronze, copper, but mostly antler and bone. But again, these things, they're called Donar's Club just because Donar is interpretatio Romana into Hercules. So the assumption was, oh, well, Germanic people are wearing these, so this must be for Germanic Hercules. And so it was called Donar's Toilet. In reality, Hercules Magusanos's cult places are filled with these. The Batavians are wearing them everywhere. And you can draw your own conclusion from that. You know what that says about Magusanos and Donar and Hercules and Ogmios and what their respective relationships to it. But it does show a blending of cultures there as well. Like down to
I haven't written an article about them yet, but there's a Swiss. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's Helvetian, but it could be maybe Lepontic, or I haven't done any of the research yet. What I did do though was I looked to his name, and he sounds like maybe another type of like Herculean type figure, because his name essentially means broad-chested, and just speculation right now.
Is that Cutrix?
No, that's Catrix is Lord of War, but I think
that's the Helvetian Pautatis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think his name it's either Cassonus or Caecivus. I cannot. But essentially his name means broad-chested, which when I did a brief little, like a quick little like divination, like tarot card reading like that, and I kept getting archer symbolism, and I kind of clicked in my head that, and this, like I said, this is just speculation, but when you draw back a bow, you're exposing your chest and you're broadening it out. And that's, so I think because Hercules was also an archer.
He was.
Yeah, and so I think
how far back that symbolism goes is also, but Grimm puts forth that Donar or Thunraz, the previous version, was also an archer, and that the original Germanic thunder god was a hurler of stones instead of any particular weapon, which lines up nicely with Tyrannus is hurling his lightning bolts, and Finnish Ukko, who's an archer as well.
Yeah, Ukko.
So that totally ties right into Hercules or any thunder.
Yeah, and it's just funny how that I don't want to say archetype, but like how that theme is very common. Yeah. How like there's always like a Herculean type figure.
And I like that you touched on archetypes, because I feel like along with artificial pantheon purists, that's another thing that I think is funny is archetypes, because many people are quick to dismiss similarities between divinities for fear of stepping into archetypalism. But what archetypalism really is all human beings have expressions within themselves, and different cultures will manifest them differently. And I think that's archetypalism. But if we just acknowledge the similarities between divinities, all that really says is, there are guys who are similar, and you can take your own theological stance on whether that means we all interpret the same guys slightly differently, or it can be like, are you a comic book fan?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, it's the same thing. You can have, Marvel's Sentry and DC's Superman, and they embody the same thing, but they're not the same guys. But then alternatively, when you have, branching things like, Odin and Wotan, or Lug and Lugus, I think that's probably closer to like, if you saw the new Spider-Man movie, that's probably closer to, Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland. Like, yes, they're all Spider-Man. They're all different Spider-Men. And I think that's the same thing too, and if someone says, hey, what's your favorite Spider-Man story? You're not wrong for talking about something from, the 60s or something from the Ultimates universe that is also Spider-Man. It's just a different Spider-Man. And both of those, I think, the diverging paths, the different versions of Spider-Man's, as well as the different superheroes who are just similar. I think that stays far away from archetypalism, but we're just very afraid to step into that. But comparative mythology, I feel, always validates both sides, because it's like, hey, these guys have something similar. I'm getting hints of that, but I don't have that piece. If I take that piece and plug and play here, just see how it feels. That Deuoi will let me know whether or not I should continue this or not. And again, cultic practices can differ from tradition to tradition, even person to person.
And that's exactly how I do my reconstruction for the Alpine tribes, the Helvetii, the Lapati. That's essentially what I do. Is I do comparative. And one thing that I kind of do, because that way, what you just said was honestly about the your version of looking at archetypes. It's fantastic. That's a great way to look at it. The way I usually explain it is that, like, let's say I have a cousin and I have a really good friend that they have similar interests. They have this, they like to do this, they like to do that. They are very similar in a lot of ways, but they are two separate different. They are separate people. And because a lot of people will try to, like we talked about before, they just try to, oh, this guy's like this guy, so they just try to mush them together. And that's, I think that you just, it gets rid of the nuance, and I think nuance is key, especially when reconstruction, but reconstructing what we do.
100%, yeah, and that's another thing that we talk about in MB a lot too, is reconstruction as methodology, but not the end all be all. We don't identify ourselves as reconstructionists, because that's limiting. If anyone is listening who's really into fitness, and someone is like, oh yeah, I'm a power lifter, they don't do anything else, then that's great, they're a power lifter. But if you do other things, calling yourself a power lifter is inaccurate. If your goal is to be a well-rounded athlete, but you're only pursuing a particular sport, then you may be great at that particular sport, but you're not a great all-around athlete.
Yeah, no, it's like, if you take I think the very, 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 very few people have actually been able to kind of jump around to different sports. I think I can't remember his name. Bo Jackson, I think, was one of the few people who could actually jump from sport to sport and excel. Whereas, like, Michael Jordan, great at basketball, awful at baseball.
Give it a shot, though. He gave it a shot.
He gave it a shot, and that's more than a lot of people. So
Yep.
I know we kind of covered a little bit, but my next question was, what are some Deuoi in the MB tradition that really stand out or are more popular than most? And we've gone over. I already forgot his name.
Some
again.
of them. Well, we've gone over it, and it's perfectly fine. You don't need it. You can also just call him Hercules Magusanos, just Hercules. Because like I said, we all have slightly different takes on him. But he's probably one of the big ones. Is Hercules Magusanos.
Real quick, it's funny, I keep forgetting his name, because I'm pretty sure I made a carving for someone in MB of him, because I'm pretty sure I remember the name. I remember writing the name down. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I carved him for someone. But but it's funny. I've made it quite.
Probably Ricky, because Ricky was in MB for a long period of time. He no longer is. He's doing something else now. And what he's cooking up is just phenomenal. So if you're ever talking to him again, just privately, you should, because in terms of localization, he's doing a brilliant thing regarding like Texas German, which is that's a whole nother rabbit hole that this podcast does not have time for. But there is a distinct German population in Texas, but they're actually Prussian. Even though they're Texas Germans, they come from Prussian stock. And so what he's doing is this really beautiful localized version of Prussian with neighboring Germanic and Gaulish influences and Finnish influence. And it's just so organic, so real. I mean, it's decidedly a new localized tradition based in ancient sources. He's doing something beautiful, but he's safe to say he's no longer in MB, but I do know that he got quite a few statues from me.
He did. He I think out of everyone I've carved for, he put down a lot of money because he wanted a lot of idols.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
he's got tons of them too,
yeah,
and he
but
still uses them to this day. Like
oh,
they're
good.
all in his setup, so they're cool to watch.
I know I need to talk to him. I haven't talked to him in a while, but but yeah, the reason I even wrote that question down is because I've made so many of these different Deuoi that are part of the Bolgoi. I just wanted because we had Magusanos and what are some others that like kind of like stand out?
And that's fun because we have a spreadsheet actually. We compare
Oh,
and contrast. And so some gods, like Hercules Magisanos, we do all worship. We also have a shared ancestor figure, which we claim mythical descent from, not literal,
yeah.
bloodline, whatever, but mythical traditional descent would be Hercules Magisanos' partner, Keltina. Um, so that she's shared well among all of us. And we do find a lot of common themes. So the next few Deuoi I'm listing are not universal, but they're very, very common. A lot of us worship Reynespater and Mother Moselle, which would be the Moselle River. She
Hmm.
mainly starts appearing in more romantic era literature, but she is very much an established character, and we do know that she's a very strong local Deuoi. Um, a lot of us also worship some variation of the Gaulish Mercury. Which particular brand of Gaulish Mercury that is doesn't really matter to us. We come together, and
Yep.
what we'll do is oftentimes Viducus, who more than often leads the rituals, they will call out, and then everyone will just go around calling out to one or multiple Gaulish Mercuries because we'll hail them all at the same time. Also, the Deuoi, using that not in the literal term, but the Alkoi, whatever variations thereof. I personally
Mm.
venerate two Alkoi from Ratian folklore. And I know that Selg and Brun have reconned and received names for the Alkoi, which they use themselves.
Hmm.
So we venerate different Alkoi as a group, but those are very, very common as well. As are the Matrona, because those are incredibly variable. They're local too, but everyone has slightly different Matrona as well. But we all have Matrona, and we come together and we'll worship them. Camulus is another very, very popular guy. Intrabus as well. Ericura shows up from time to time. So basically, if it's within the region of Germania Inferior and some Germania Superior, then most likely there's someone there who worships this god. But we're also drawing from outside sources, anything from that general area, because a big tenet of MB is, like we said, kind of a synchronicity in its nature. So, you may find someone that also has, Jupiter Optimus Maximus in there. I personally am a huge Mithras guy who had a lot of temples there in that area too. And theoretically, if you wanted to be a super recon and I only do the Belgae stuff, you could extrapolate that there were statistically probably some Belgae who were adherents of Mithras, but that kind of justification is rather silly
Yeah.
because they're compatible, and ultimately what you identify as in terms of your praxis, and you can have multiple labels. There's no reason why someone can't attend a Rodnaberry, so Slavic polytheism thing one day, and then the next day they go and do a Gaul thing. Just the joys of ancient religions. You can keep them separate. You can mash them, and a lot of folks are very staunch on historical syncretism only, which is strange because the reason historical syncretism existed was because these people met and exchanged ideas. And now, what with the internet and us not having super established populations, that exchange is going to occur naturally. And
Mhm.
as a Swiss person, I know you're looking into the folklore, you're going to see this. But Isis shows up a lot in Swiss folklore, like Egyptian Isis. You can try and explain that away and come up with theoretical whatevers, but we know that the Helveti had a huge Isis urn with her in her Egyptian form on there that was buried 300 years before the fall of Gaul. And so you're like, where'd that come from? It's
I
like I
should
said,
have to
you
look
may
into
find the
that.
odd floater in there, and
Yeah.
we don't have distinct holidays for everyone's individual god, the ones that we celebrate together. But there's also no reason why someone can't invoke that god. If we're doing something towards the war gods and someone has a particular affinity for, I don't know, Norse Tyr, if they hail Norse Tyr while everyone else is going around hailing Camulus and Multinus, no one's going to be shocked or appalled or weirded out at that,
Yeah.
because it's, you are still a Belgae, even if you have a couple gods from other practices, because it's how you conduct yourself.
Yeah. And me personally, I like Tyr's a big deity in my personal life. So I mean, I'm not 100% Gaulpol. I do follow some of the Norse gods as well, mainly Tyr. Tyr's the big one.
It's funny because, yeah, like I said, I've got my foot in a couple of different doors, but Tyr's the one that's like never been able to. Like, I've tried, believe me, I've tried, and I've had Deuois who have been less responsive or just more distant. I mean, Uranus Pater and Mithras are two really, really important Deuois in my practice, and they're both beyond what I want to say. Like when you're trying to commune with Uranus Pater, it's like the concept of the world river itself, and it's quiet. It's not the same. And there've been some Deuois where it's been like immediate. Tyrannus is one of those guys where it's just, in my personal experience, just my relationship is very direct and you can practically feel. But then, Tyr has been one of those guys. Back when I was, just Norse, I tried a lot. There was no returns on the phone call. And I was like, oh, it just is that way sometimes.
It's funny because that was me with, because so many people like are in, they do their work with Thor, and Thor, I made years and years and years ago, I made a Thor joke on Discord, and it actually caused that the person who I told the joke to, their house got struck by lightning. So aside from so Thor and I have kind of a relationship, but Tyr is like every time I've reached out to him for something, I've gotten a response back. Aneklamara, when I was doing the article on her and doing the divination, very responsive. Alpez, on the other hand, nothing. She like I got this feeling like, I acknowledge you, I appreciate you're trying to reach out, but no, thank you. And it's just, and everyone, yeah, and then they do that. They attach to people they like, and then but there are some that just
And that's why the idea that you can't, let's say if you are a Gaulpol because you approach the world in a Gaulish fashion, you don't need to use Gaulish in your praxis. If that's what connects you to the Deuois, do it, man. That's awesome. But you don't need to speak Gaulish. What I've done recently is I've thrown out a lot of the language stuff, and I've just replaced it with Swiss German, because that's really the lens I'm approaching it through. And it's been very fun to find Swiss German versions of names for the gods, because some of them are mentioned. There's Arto was huge for the Helvetii, I assume, just because of regional iconography and all that. But there's a folklore character called Bear Mother, that I'm translating now from Swiss German, called Bear Mother, and that's just her whole name. And she rears several human children who all go off to be like great heroes. And I'm like, that's great, because there she is. So to me, that's just what I call her, Air Mother, right? Bear Mother. I have no illusions that it's not Arito, but that's for me not the name. But other people may find much more significance in using Arito. And you may also find, that there are Deuois that you have a great relationship with, and that changes. Like for me, I was very much aspiring towards Ogmios. And, I was very, very closely praying. I had a whole athletic cultist to Ogmios. And then there was one big thing where I was like, man, I really need this to work. And it was a project at work. And I was like, there's no way the higher ups are going to go for this. And I prayed to Ogmios, and I did it. The project took off, and we did it. And it was amazing. And then the line just went dead. So you're like, maybe that was the only reason. And that's it. That's where the relationship ends.
Yeah. I absolutely, they're there to help us out with like there's only like a certain few that are going to have like the day-to-day relationship with us. Yeah, absolutely. And we've touched on it a little bit, but are there any like special rituals or holidays that SBMB like kind of follows? I know, with BNG we have, he goes Nelos, but he goes by Saturkos now. He's been doing a lot of work with the Caligny calendar and doing like some crazy stuff with it, like awesome stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. We actually don't observe the Caligny calendar. First of all, the Caligny calendar is very, local, and we follow along with the 2-season model as laid out by Segamaris, but also that we know from medieval authors was common among the Germanic people, and even in folklore of Belgium and Switzerland, we find that that there are major festivals in the fall and the spring, and so we've arrived much more on a 2-season model. And the Caligny calendar, for us, because yes, we're Gallo-Roman as well, just like the Caligny calendar, but we've taken stuff a lot more from. There's really 2 versions of holidays. Either we will directly lift from a Roman holiday, meaning that if we have a Deuoi like Epona, we're just going to celebrate Eponalia. We're not going to celebrate her in a Roman context. We celebrate her in a Gaulish context, but we're going to use the same date. And then we do have other more seasonal ones that are just the big quote unquote pagan festivals that seem to occur, the spring, the fall, the summer, the halfway through the winter, the ending of the winter. Those are just big ones that seem to be present in all conditions or traditions, and will oftentimes extol from local folklore as well. And some of them, like I said, they're just going to be straight lifted from Roman festivals we know were celebrated in the area, but we're going to celebrate them as a Gaul.
Yeah.
So, we do Lupercalia, but it has nothing to do with the Roman Lupercalia, which was, mainly a state festival honoring Romulus and Remus. And Romulus and Remus in MB itself don't play any role, though they may play a role to someone in MB, but in the tradition itself, they're not really present.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, but like I said, the big ones for us, Magaseniaka, that's going to be in the summer, a little bit before the midsummer. And we do, that's a big competition. I've done Eponalia. I actually did Eponalia through TG, and it was the first. If anyone who's listening isn't in TG, we do a full moon ritual every time, and this was actually what kicked off the idea of the full moon rituals. Was about a year ago, I did an Eponalia ritual, and there was a lot of really great positive feedback, and tons of people joined for exactly that reason, because of the live rituals. And if you go to the YouTube, they have tons of rituals up there right now. You don't need to be a member of TG. You don't even need to know what TG is. But if you go to the TG YouTube, there's tons of rituals there, and they're designed to pull up and follow along or just get inspiration. And like I said, that one was Eponalia. We started that one, and it's pretty big for us. We also, like I said, we have a Matrona festival, which is very, very big for us as well.
Awesome.
And a lot of them we're going to be celebrating for the first time this year, so that's really interesting.
Awesome. And for anyone new that's listening, TG is Touta Galation. If you just like try to sound it out and type it into YouTube, it'll typically pop up. But yeah, they have been posting their rituals on YouTube, and I watched one, and it was really, really cool. I really liked what they did. So this next question, so and Caesar touched on this a little bit, like he goes out of his way in his memoirs talking about how the Bolgoi are like these kind of like the warrior people, like they have a very, very big warrior like society, warrior mindset, to my understanding. Renowned for their warrior prowess. Like does that kind of translate into more of a modern context? I know you were talking about athletic cultists, and because I think I'm still in the MB Discord channel, and I believe that's kind of where a lot of the there's kind of like a warrior kind of theme or flavor to like your guys' like virtues
Yeah, oh,
and stuff like
definitely. And we have a very large, like proportionate number of actual warriors within the tradition. You know, vets and people that just got off an active duty tour. But that's not everybody. You know, I
yeah,
myself, I'm an athletic guy, but I'm not a warrior in the traditional sense. But that doesn't mean that you can't live the virtues of a warrior, and being honest, being upright, being fearless. A lot of it is never caving, which ties back to Selg fighting fascists on Twitter. It's a lot of that is not backing down. And that's the same thing with the athletic cultists. And I feel we get a lot of pushback on that from people who don't want to have physical exercise, just because there's a lot of stigma attached to that as part of their day-to-day. They don't want to add a stress. They don't want to think about something, but really we don't have any benchmarks. There's no, you must deadlift this much to be an MB. There's a couple of real meatheads in there. There's Riak, who actually does a lot of the planning for a lot of the MB people. So if you want a workout plan, he'll get you one like that. The guy's insane knowledge. But we also have, a lot of other meatheads in there. And I count myself among the meatheads who just love to work out. But what that means is it's just about improving yourself physically. We also have members who are limited in their physical ability, but they still strive to improve where they can improve. And that's how we measure that. It's part of that warrior, never giving up, never giving in thing. We have members who may not be able to physically get up and go for a run, or people who, might have difficulty lifting a heavy weight. But what these people will do is, they'll go on long walks. One of the members ordered a mace, like one of those fitness maces, and they taught themselves how to do enough to like get their arms going, and they feel stronger and they feel the improvement that way, but they're not measuring how much more they can do. Like Ignos is another guy. He's just brilliant, but he does all sorts of physical stuff and a lot of martial arts stuff. And you could take me in a fight any day, but that's not the point. The point is that both of us are working hard and just going to be better than we were the day beforehand. And that's what our athletic cultus means to us. It's a physical improving, but also a mental improving. If you're just hitting the gym every day, but you don't read anything, then you're neglecting that too. And it doesn't mean you have to sit down and crack open, tome after tome of scholarly papers. It just means improving from where you're at.
Yeah. And, being in the military myself, I firsthand, and I was in the Marine Corps, so firsthand, it's not just a whole brigade of Conan the Barbarians, Arnold Schwarzenegger's walking around. There's some, I was pushing the limit for a while, and I actually got out mainly because maybe I think 2 years early because of my weight. I was really struggling with my weight because I was dealing with a lot of personal stuff at the time. But because of my my dedication, my service, my attitude, just how I carried myself every single day, even though I was working on my weight, but I wasn't quite getting it, I still got out with an honorable discharge. So there's even like the military today, it goes beyond just the physical stuff or just being able to fight, having that mentality, just have the values and virtues in your head and carrying that with you every day, in my mind, qualifies you to be a warrior. And that's
100%. It's a Gaulish podcast, so I don't want to get too Norse on you, but there's that stanza in the Havamal that's like, a blind man can still something, I don't know, it says a lame man can still ride a horse. And it's like, it's not about that. It's about keep going forward. And like you said, even when you have immense personal things that are stopping you from doing all you want to do or being all you can be, that doesn't mean that you quit entirely. And that's where we draw our athletic and our warrior cultist from. It's more adopting the useful things and values of a traditional warrior society. You don't have to be a pro-gun, pro-war
Yeah,
person to benefit from that.
exactly. And actually, I'm very, being overseas myself, I'm very anti that. We don't. Oh my goodness, yeah, just
Yeah, there's a lot there's a lot of vets that think like you do too.
yeah.
Yeah.
um, but I also brought that up because anyone that's a fan of the Civilization games, in Civilization 6, which is the current one, there's a DLC where they added the Gauls as a playable civilization, and the Gaul they chose, Ambiorix of the Belgae.
Ambiorix was cool.
Yeah.
So
the fact that he made it, the fact that he made it over like Vercingetorix, I was impressed with that.
Yeah, that's true. There could have been quite a few different ones, but yeah, and I know we do have a few people who give hero cultus to Ambiorix, and also Crixus is a big hero that a lot of us have as well. The general of Spartans, of Spartacus's rebellion. We don't actually know, where in Gaul he came from, but he embodies the warrior spirit, and so to a lot of people there, he's very important.
Oh, for real. And actually, on TikTok, because every now and then I'll go into someone's live and chat a little bit, and like especially like people who are like in the polytheistic or pagan communities, and a lot of times I have to explain what Gaul is, but on occasion I'll run into someone who knows what Gaul is based on the show Spartacus because of Crixus.
Man, that actor Manny something or other, man, he's so good. He did a very good Crixus.
Yeah.
And both the guys who did Spartacus did a very good job as well.
Yeah, I need to watch that show. I haven't watched it yet. Okay, and then I mean we kind of touched on it a little tiny bit, but I know something I used to do on the podcast was I try to end the show with a tradition from this or a tradition, a virtue from this tradition or that tradition.
You've done most of the MB virtues, huh? Those have been the ones you've done recently.
Yeah. I went on your guys' website and did that, and those ones, because normally like with the TG or BNG, like the virtues are kind of they're straightforward. There's a lot of commonalities between like even Saponia Roti. Their virtues are they're similar, but your guys' was just like it was very unique. So but so yeah, if anyone's that's listened to the show before, like how, because the question I wrote down was most cultural traditions have similar virtues, values, etc. What sets MB apart from the rest of and makes them unique? And then something I noticed a lot with your guys' virtues, like kind of like how we were just talking about. There's almost like a warrior mentality behind.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's something I noticed.
Yeah, and it's very much to broadly qualify. I think a lot of the virtues are fighting against entropy and chaos. A lot of it is about self-improving and making strides in your life and for your immediate family and your friends and your fellow Belgae and then your fellow Gaul and the whole circles. But a lot of it is fighting stagnation, because there's oftentimes this figure that's thrown around that a polytheist's half-life is 5 years. They say that after 5 years everyone's going to switch traditions or go back to whatever faith they were raised in, or they're going to go back to Christianity or atheism or whatnot. There's just that 5-year shelf life, and it's an unfortunate but kind of true stereotype. And I think that's just because people are afraid of no longer having a support system, because after 5 years a lot of the hand holding is done and you're on your own a little bit, and as any Gaul will know, you're kind of thrown out on your own a lot sooner because of the lack of sources. And then you get into something as complex and nuanced as the Belgae, where you have more sources to draw from. But if you're going to be one of those people that's hung up on doing it correctly, you're going to get lost pretty quickly too. And I find that that's super helpful. in
Yeah.
fighting the entropy or the chaos, internal and external. And I think a lot of ours are, the tenets are a lot more, I don't know, I want to say philosophically broad.
Hmm. That's a
They're
good way
like
to
a lot
describe
more
it.
personal application. And I think they were phrased that way purposefully because an athletic cultist might mean different things to people. Being a warrior might be different things, but you have an obligation to be a warrior in whatever capacity that takes.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And it's actually funny you mentioned the fight because I met a lot of people who do that. Like it is a sad like truth how yeah after a few years someone they
Mhm.
go from they go from heathenry over to Hellenistic or the one thing I have not seen is someone going to Christianity, but I have seen people go from paganism to like atheism or polytheism to atheism.
Yeah.
But like that's one points that one of the reasons I even have the podcast is to kind of give information and resources out to people, and anyone that follows me on TikTok, I try to do it there too. But I often get distracted with making funny things on there because
Well, that's needed as well. Humor is
yeah,
needed as engagement.
if I was that serious all the time, I would lose my mind.
Right? I try not to be.
Now I know Seg Selig alone could answer this, but does MB participate in any form of activism, or does it just kind of stay neutral on certain topics? And like
I mean,
Selig
no,
is not.
we're 100% not neutral. I don't want to proselytize or anything, but we have a very, very diverse community in regards to where people live. We have members from Europe. We have members from all over the US, Canada. We're very, very diverse that way. We have a huge diversity in gender identities and sexualities, and even how we engage with those. So I can distinctly say that we're all on similar pages when it comes to politically, and we will inform each other and talk about each other. But as a tradition, there is no group effort towards specific causes, but Cell will oftentimes, say, hey guys, this is what's going on, let's do this. Or Brun will bring something up and say, hey, yeah, this is currently going on. Here's how you guys can help. We'll talk to each other, but it's not like we say, we as MD are gonna do this right now. That's not a place where we're currently at, but I don't know what the future holds. Like I said, you mentioned SR. I'm also a part of SR, and that's a lot more the motto there. And I'd love to see that very gung-ho activism be a part of everything. So I can't say that we won't do that eventually. I can just say that right now we're a lot of people with similar interests and concerns, and we support each other individually through that. But there's not considered group effort as
Yeah,
an organization.
I'll have to rephrase that for future tradition episodes because that's very that's a really good point to make. Is that like a lot of people it with like it's BNG is the same way. Like almost everyone within it is an activist in some shape or form, but like I'm just speaking out of personal experience. I haven't been on the Discord in a while, but BNG like hasn't collectively gone out and done anything like any kind of activism, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong, but yeah, with SR and a lot of these traditions, there a lot of activism it comes out of them, and that's something that I absolutely love. And like just like all these traditions have like they're unique in their own, and they're separate, but like that's one thing that I think all of us can kind of come together on is that like that there's a lot wrong that needs to be fixed and changed, and it's all for the greater good of the community of all of
Mhm.
us, whether we're Gaulish polytheists or not. We're trying to look out for each other and make the world a better place so we can continue to grow and thrive as Gaulish polytheists and as human beings.
Yeah, well, that's not such an indistinguishable fact. I'd argue it's probably hard to be a good Gaulish polytheist and a bad person. Yeah, that's a
Mm.
combination that I think is is hard to gel, and that's probably just because what little we do have comparatively resource wise to a lot of the other more popular polytheist traditions is the impression of the character that Gauls have made, and as such, that's something that we cling to and we use as an identifier. There is a lot of passion, even if there's not a lot of written sources or anything.
It's actually, it's interesting you say that, because a kind of I don't want to say their name because I don't want to promote them in any way, shape, or form, but there is a group, a Facebook group, unfortunately, of Gaulish polytheists who are all about, oh, you have to be of, a certain bloodline or DNA percentage to be a Gaulish polytheist, to be a druid or whatever. And so yeah, that's a good point you made.
It's hilarious. So do Irish druids just not exist to them, or what's the deal with that? Which countries are Gaulish, quote unquote? Come on, come fight me with that.
Right? Like, yeah,
what does that even mean? Probably the same group of people that are like, well, Gallo-Roman isn't really Gaulish. And you're like, that's the same as saying America, 100 years ago is less American than America today. And that's just such a weird Western, academic way to neatly classify history. And like if you went to a Gaul, during the Cimbrian raids, would you be like, hey, are you a Gaul? And then if you went to a Gaul, under Postumus's rule of Gallia Belgica, when you said, hey, are you a Gaul? There's a high chance both of them would say no, both would say yes, or one would say yes, one would say no, but they couldn't guarantee which one is that. It's
well, does it completely invalidate like the Gaulish tribes that settled out in Anatolia? Well, they're living, what's now Turkey. So
their cult shifted towards Sabazios, Attis, and Sibyl.
Yeah.
Well, those are Gaulish gods. Not in origin, no, but that's the same thing. I was lucky enough, because of my heathen experience, I was lucky enough to get to do the MB treatment on Wadanas. But we're taking a different stance on it, because there was a theory in the 70s that went out of fashion but has now come back in full force and is in academia. Oftentimes the more pushed theory is that the origin of Wadanas is not he who is fury, like Adam of Bremen reports. It is actually Watanos, which would be from Vate. And the idea is that whatever deity Watanos was beforehand, he became synchronized and heavily influenced by Gaulish druidic practices. And that is why you have Wadanas, who later on in the Norse pantheon becomes Odin. Like the only reason Odin is the way he is, or in large part is the way he is because of Gaulish influence. And it would be absolutely strange to go around and claim it's a purely Germanic conception. And yeah, it's the same thing. Epona is a Gaulish goddess, but the Romans worshipped her as well. She made a huge impact there. And a Roman, occultist, Deorum Romanum practitioner, or occultist, is not less Roman for including that. Just like Mithras as an example, that's a Zoroastrian deity. Now the cult is entirely Roman, and the mythology combines various different parts of Zoroastrianism with Roman savior cults. It's its own thing and a staunchly Roman deity. So, Sibyl and Attis, as worshipped by Gauls, would be Gaulish deities. And so even if you were like someone focused on the Helvetii and you're like, I'm going to slap Sabazios in there, that's why it's so hard when people get uber fixated on those little boxes. But at the same point in time, there is a big difference between not using any recon methodology at all. There's a big difference between mostly working off of instinct or mostly working off of historical sources. And honestly, I think you need a bit of both. And you need to discern what's right for you more than anything else, instead of what's objectively Gaulish. It's how do I do Gaul?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything that Senobessus Bolgon, MB, SB is doing that you want to like maybe plug in or something like that?
We have a couple members that will be presenting on the next Comreton. For those of you who don't know, Touta Galation does quarterly, sometimes quarterly, sometimes bi-yearly big events. Last time I had the great honor of presenting on the rations, and we had folks present various theories. We had a very, very good in-depth explanation of the Ruina system, which is one of the many Leopontic alphabetic systems for divination. There are like 3 or 4 floating around there. And they're all very, very different. So I just recommend you give them all a try and see, which one you like the best, or, practice them all, be well versed in all of them. But, we had that. And so we have quite a few members presenting on that coming up in the on the 3rd. This one's going to be pre-recorded. You will also be seeing an Epinalia ritual from us. And I'll be doing that one on the 18th. So I'll be doing that one on the 18th, also through Touta Galation. Again, you can join the server and watch it from there if you're already in the server. If you don't want to bother with that, then you can just go on the YouTube. It'll be live streamed on the 18th, or you can just catch it later when we upload it. Furthermore, you can find us on Discord. Our Discord server is Cali Bolgon. That is CALLIBOLOGON. And that's our more public server. It's the Belgian forest is what it translates to. It's a bit of a ghost town sometimes, so activity comes and goes in bursts. But we are there. That's how you can reach us if you have any questions or you just want to trowel through some of the stuff we discussed. And of course, you can find us online at senobessusbolgon.wordpress. That is the wonderful blog, and you can find a lot more stuff there. You can find a list of some of our major deities. We talk about cosmic principles and how we interpret fate, and the different parts of the human soul, or the various different souls that a human being has. We have sample ritual, and we have example rituals that you can just wholesale adopt or alter for yourself. And there's also a contact tab, so you can get in contact with us there. And for further research, I would heavily recommend the YouTube channel Imperium Romanum. They are a group of Germans living in the Rhine Basin on the German side, and they're heavily focused in reenactment and reconstruction of Roman life on the Rhine frontier. And they have a special episode about the Batavians, and you can glean a lot from the relationship between Rome and the border states like Rome and Gaul and Rome and later the Germanoi, and how complex and multi-layered that relationship was. So I heavily recommend you check them out as well if you're listening and you're curious about really any frontier. And by that I mean along the Rhine, any of the frontier areas, and Roman, Gaulish, Gallo-Roman, or Germanic. Check that out. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the website for sure has got a lot of information. And a lot of the articles that like Bruin and Selg have written, amazing. Just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, there was a high bar when I wrote that article, and then they go down to the linguistics and the theories and the interpretations and the attestations and what everything could mean. And I'll tell you, that was one of the most high pressure things I've ever had to write, just because of the sheer standard of things that the website has.
It's funny because I'm still, and it's been over a year now, I'm still working on the article about Gaulish giants, the Coraroi, and because there's so much on giants, it's so much to sift through. It's insane.
Oh well, you got to hop in the SR stuff. Giants are a big thing for them.
Oh, okay.
Especially they do that a lot too. And now you just before the stream you were telling me that you had a fairy tale book, and there's from Switzerland too, and there's tons of giant stuff in there. Tons of giant stuff. Wow. Yeah, so that's going to be a good one when it does come out. I'm excited to read it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. For anyone, and this is definitely off topic for the podcast. But yeah, if you want to know Swiss mythology, Swiss folklore and mythology, it's a good book right there.
Yeah, Revenge of the Black Cat. Yeah, well, and I'd argue it's not entirely off topic. The common complaint we oftentimes hear is, there's no Gaulish myths, but there is a lot of folklore in Gaulish countries, and it's pretty readily identifiable. If the folklore is not Christian in origin, if it's not entirely Germanic, then you can clearly glean Gaulish themes and concepts. And speaking of the Comreton, I'm actually doing a presentation there on the 3rd that will compare a Swiss legend with a story from the Rig Veda, the battle of Indra versus Thriftra, and the battle of the White Bull of Uri against the dragon. And what you see there is striking parallels to the point where, and bulls we know have a huge association with Tyrannus. They were sacrificed to him. The Gundelstruck cauldron, which has a huge Tyrannus thing on it, also has an amazing inlay of a bull on the inside, and so he's heavily tied to that animal as a thunderer. And so just by knowing that folklore, you can heavily glean what a myth might have looked like. So I would never dismiss folklore.
Oh, absolutely. And especially like I said, I'm writing this thing on giants, and I've done it with the Deuoi and the Tatzelwurm. The folklore is going to end up being like a huge source to go through, because even though there's so much time has gone by, you're still going to find those little nuggets, those little seeds of the original source that are there. Yeah. Anyway, that is enough, or that is all for this episode. Thank you again, Renoturos, for being here. This was an awesome episode, going in depth on Senobessus Bolgon, or soon to be MB. And yeah, I will.
Any day now.
Yeah. I'll put all those links and all that information in the description of this episode. But thank you again, bud. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime. All right.